him just a minute
Yeah, that's what I thought he said. He's a.
Okay,
to switch whatever we're switching.
okay. Good to
Okay,
go.
we're ready to go.
We good?
Okay, Mr. Patton,
All right.
take the
Dr.
wheel.
Maddox, thank you for being here today. It takes a significant amount of courage to volunteer for a position like this, much less to submit to a very, very public interview, as you're doing. This is a job that comes with an enormous responsibility and an intense amount of community scrutiny. So thank you for being here, and thank you for volunteering.
I appreciate the opportunity.
This board's got a lot of questions that it wants to cover in a relatively short period of time, so I would just ask you to be mindful of that and do your best to keep answers concise. First of all, would you like to make an opening statement? Or?
I would prefer to make a closing statement.
Certainly, absolutely. Then I'll go ahead and start with the questions. This mic is a little hot.
I would say that I sure do appreciate you guys providing those questions for us all, and that way it sort of equals the playing field for all of us. So, thank you.
Yes. Dr. Maddox, what do you consider the foremost responsibilities of the superintendent and the skills needed for success in that position?
Oh, wow. I read over that question yesterday, and the first thing I looked at, I thought, okay, the responsibilities. According to our board, our job descriptions, we've got 4 pages of responsibilities a director of school has. There's a lot of responsibilities there. Responsibilities and skills go hand in hand. I think the foremost responsibility that the director of school is going to have is leadership. If we don't have the leadership skills to move forward, then that's going to be the first factor that disqualifies us for this position, I feel like. So number one would be the responsibility. It would be leadership skills. I believe with leadership, you have to lead from the front, not from the side, not from the back. So, and also during this crisis that we have, this is going to be a challenging time, guys. We've got more issues this year than we've ever had before. With COVID-19, with the culture, the fear that's out there among our community and around the state and around the nation, this is going to be an important decision, and choose wisely. So I think the most important skills is going to be leadership.
You mentioned, is that Mr. Safdie?
It is the backlog from,
If we could have him mute his, I think that would help.
Robbie, can you mute your computer until it's time for you to talk? Robbie?
Okay, I'm going to move on. What do you consider to be your greatest strengths as a potential director of schools?
Well, there again, I'll just go back to what I just got through making a statement of. I think it's the leadership skills. My leadership style has always been more of a transformationist. Also, servitude. I serve the people that I work with. I firmly believe in that. With the transformist leadership style, you take something, you transform it, and you move ahead. So I think that's my number one strength that I have. I think I have proven that as well in the past years that I've been working at Stonewall High School. I think the ability to build relationships. And it's not just relationships with you guys, but it's also relationships with the community, with students, with faculty. I don't think that I have a problem with building those relationships. I think that's very important. The next, I would say, would be team building. One of the very first things that we've got to be able to do, that director of school is going to have to do, is organize a strong team. I think I have a proven record of building those type of teams. You have to have a lot of diversity on your team. When I look at team members and I'm trying to build a team, I used to tell my assistant principals, I do not and I will not hire someone that will agree with me all the time. Why would I do that? And when you're working with a group of people, we have a tendency to hire people like ourselves. But you have to get past that. And you got to hire those people who will tell you what you may not want to hear. It's the same way, and Coach Inman remembers, it's just like coaching staffs. You may get into a room, and every Monday morning we would have our administrative meeting, and I would tell my team that we've got some issues, let's deal with them. I do not have a lock in all the great ideas. I do not have the answers to every situation. But before we walk out of this room, we may disagree in here, but when we walk out of this room, out of this office, we're going to be on the same page. And we're going to illustrate that we've got a unified effort among this administrative team, and we're going to work together. But we're going to disagree behind those doors because that's part of life, and that's how you move forward, and that's how you excel. The other thing, the strength that I have, I think is experience. I think the experience that I have sort of reminds me, if you recall, the first time you ever left home to go anywhere. If you were like me, I remember leaving home for the very first time to go to college. And growing up in a small southern town, I thought everybody grew up the way I did. But I found out really quick we did not. People had different experiences. People had different ideas. So in my experiences have been through with different leaders in different school systems. I think that when you work for different leaders, I think that's an advantage to you. It's not a disadvantage, because you take those ideas and those traits of those real good leaders, and you grow with those, and you become to form your own leadership style. But if you're always under one leader, and you have an opportunity to take over something, any type of institution, what is your basis? Your basis is from that leader that you've worked with for so long. But the more people you work around, and the more people that leads by example, it's sort of like when you do your student teaching. If you never had an opportunity to do any observing of another teacher, you're going to be taking up the habits of that lead teacher that taught you through your student teaching. That's why it's important for our teachers to get out and view other teachers, something we did quite frequently. You've got to watch other people. Take those good things they're doing. Incorporate those into your habits, into the things that you do, your strategies. It makes us all stronger. So there again, I think that's one of my strengths. I've got a lot of experience in those.
Thank you. Dr. Maddox, if selected, explain your strategies for a successful transition period.
Well, the transitions, I feel like transitions always have to be smooth. One of the advantages I've had also is the opportunity to work at central office this past year. This central office is made up with a lot of wonderful, hardworking people, dedicated people. I think that the transition has to be smooth. Whenever someone takes over the institution, it doesn't matter if it's a school, it could be a church, it could be an industry, but I've always felt like when you take over something like that, the transition, you can't go into a place with guns blazing at the very beginning. You can't go into anywhere with making all the changes. So you go into a school or any institution and you make a lot of changes. What you're creating is, and you're telling the people around you that you're working with, they didn't know what they were doing. And that may not be so. That may not be so. Now, as far as academics and some of the growth that we've seen in achievement scores over the past few years, I think Cumberland County is going in the right direction with the growth in achievement scores. Some excellent results. So when you go in to something like this for the transition, you have to sit back and you have to observe. You have to observe what's going on. Yeah, are there going to be changes being made? Most certainly. But you don't go in, like I said before, with guns blazing. You've got to take a look at and see what you have. You have to conduct a needs assessment among your staff. You've got to look at the strengths and the weaknesses of the people who are around you. And then you have to go from there. And the last thing, when you've never done a job before, whether you'll be a teacher or assistant principal and then you become an administrator, you're never going to be totally prepared until you put those glasses on and look through the lens of the new job. And that's hard to prepare for that. I know that I had a lot of good advice early in my career, and I had a principal tell me one time, they said, Mr. Maddox, you've done a great job as an assistant principal and athletic director, but you guys, meaning the administrative team, don't have a clue of what's going on in the big picture of the school. You can't. because I see what you don't. This is the loneliest job you'll ever have. I have to keep secrets. I have to hold things to myself. I can't share everything. But when you put on these lenses, you're going to find out a lot more. So whether it be in the school system, and that's the same advice I gave my son when he went to work at Lowe's and got into management. And I told him, I said, you know, you moving around and watching different people lead and so forth, I said, you're going to learn from those people, but you'll never know what they go through until you sit in that chair. So I think that's part of the transition that we've got to go through. There's a lot of observing and a lot of setting back, and it's going to be a process.
Thank you. How would you develop and nurture relations and support from Board of Education, students of the community, staff, and the community itself?
Well, first of all, I think relationships, we've harped on the rigor, relevance, and relationship framework to the curriculum for so long. And I think relationship building is the most important thing you can do in a school system, whether it be a teacher and a student, teachers among teachers, a board among a director of schools. And I'll tell you straight up that I think relationships are two-way streets. If you've got friends from childhood, if you don't keep and foster that relationship, and it never can be one-sided, never can it be one-sided, whether it be in your marriage, whether it be with your friendships, your coworkers, those relationships have to be a two-way street. And so when I think about those kind of things, to foster the relationship with this board, transparency is going to be the key. And it's not just transparency with the director of schools, but it's also transparency with our board members. We all have to be transparent with one another in order to move forward and be strong. The next thing I would like to see, I would love to see our board members get involved more in the schools. I would love to see you in the school system. And I'd love to, whatever your passion is in the school, it may not be coaching, it may not be to stand around in the classroom, but what about being a guest lecturer? Why not sit in with a beta club meeting? Or why not sit in on an interact club meeting? I think it's just as important for our board members to be seen in the schools as it is our director of schools or any of the supervisors. So I would encourage that as well. When it comes to the students and staff and community, one of the things that we have to be accessible to our people, whether it be students, faculty, or staff, or the community. We always have to be accessible. We also have to be approachable, and that's one of the main things. People have got to feel comfortable enough to come and talk to you when there's a problem. If they fear you, they won't come talk. If there's no relationship, they won't share. You have to be visible. You can't sit in on an ivory tower. I don't care what leader you are, whether it's a corporation or if it's an institution of a school or a church or anything, a hospital. You cannot stay in your ivory tower and dictate how everything's being ran from there. You've got to be visible. And the last thing, you've got to have good listening skills. It's been said that, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a good reason. And so we have to listen. And sometimes it's hard, especially when you've got a million things going on in your mind and so many things to do, but you have to slow your world down and pay attention to what's being said to you and listen to those people. Because if you brush them off, you've just lost that relationship.
Dr. Maddox, what steps would you take to ensure academic excellence in our school district?
Follow the model that I used at Stone when I was out there. It always comes from the top down with your expectations. You got to have high expectations from a director of schools. Those high expectations from a director of schools has to filter down to the principals. From those high expectations from the principals comes the high expectations from those teachers. Once everybody's on board with those high expectations, then the students buy into that as well. When you set that bar real high, and you expect that performance, and you expect that behavior, and you share those expectations, you're going to get it. The other thing is we have to foster growth. We have to foster growth with an administrative team, always looking for those teachers who exhibit leadership qualities. With teachers, you have to foster the growth of the teachers. Their skills in the classroom. young teachers coming out of college, they're going to have a certain skill set, but you also have to take that skill set and you have to work with them individually. You differentiate in your professional development with your teachers, just like you differentiate the instruction of a teacher has for those students in the classroom. The next thing, and the most important thing that I think that we could possibly do, and make no mistake, the most important part of this thing we call education, the most important part, most important component of this is who we put in front of those students every single day. It's not the building principal, it's not the assistant principals, it's the teachers we put in front of them, because they're the ones who are going to make the biggest impact on that kid. Now, we can tear a kid down with the words we have. That's why I encouraged my teachers, and we talk about it all the time, don't use sarcasm with students. Sarcasm to us as adults is humorous. Sarcasm to a student who doesn't have the maturity level is insulting. And if you try to be sarcastic with a student, it doesn't work. We're quick-witted. We should be able to be a bigger smart aleck than a kid, but why would we? Why do we want to outsmart aleck somebody? All that does is cause embarrassment to a kid. Hire the best teachers. And I've always said, and I'll share this with you, and this is not in my notes or anything, but as a principal of a high school, and I remember the struggle I had when I moved to Cumberland County back in 1987 and gaining employment because I wasn't from here. I've always said that when I became principal, I will hire the best teachers that I can find. It doesn't matter where they're from. It doesn't matter the color of their skin. It doesn't matter how many phone calls. And believe you me, I've got plenty of them. I've had phone calls from previous board members. I've had phone calls from people from the courthouse, from dignitaries, from state senators, head football coaches at the collegiate level. All those kind of things does not weigh in with me until I talk with that teacher and I interview that teacher and I make a decision not based on how many phone calls I get, but I base my decision on who is going to be best serving those students, because they're the ones making the difference.
What are your strategies for ongoing professional relationships with all staff that are both respectful and earned? And this should include both certified and non-certified staff.
I think professionally, as a leader, whether it be a director of schools, it can be a principal of a school, it can be a CEO of a company. It doesn't matter. There's always got to be a professional line drawn between the leadership and your workers. I don't like to use the word subordinates because that's to me, that seems sort of degrading. I don't like using that, but there's always got to be a line drawn. There's got to be a professional line. And if it wasn't so, the military does the same exact thing. You have to draw that line professionally and know where that line is at and not step over it. Not saying that you can't be friendly, not saying that you can't be semi-friends, but there's got to be a professional line drawn. Otherwise, there's a lot of things that happen that go along with it. There's a ripple effect. There's expectations of favors, for instance, if you're not careful. So I think that's one of the main things we have. There's always been an argument. Is it better to lead out of fear or lead out of respect? Well, I never wanted to lead out of fear. I don't want anyone scared of me because why would I want someone scared of me? And this is a true story, something that would bother me sometimes with teachers, and it was hurtful to me, and I knew that I had to do something about it. But a lot of times I would ask a teacher, or I'd ask my secretary, would you call up to Mr. and Miss So-and-so's room, have them stop by between classes? I wanted a relationship with the teachers that when they stopped by my office between classes going, hey, Mr. Maddox, what can I do for you? I don't want somebody to come in wringing their hands going, am I in trouble? That would hurt me. Because I don't want to think that every time I'm going to have dealings with a faculty member that they're scared and they think they're in trouble. It could be just something very simple. I need your help with something. Or I need to give you a heads up on something about little Joe. It's a school business, not something I wanted to be scared of. The other thing, you've got to take a legitimate interest in the people that work with you. You know, you don't just give it lip service, but it doesn't matter if it's your custodians, it doesn't matter if it's your cafeteria workers, or your support staff, or the faculty. Just because you have a college degree doesn't mean you get more respect than my custodians did. You know, you've got to take a legitimate interest in the lives of these people that you serve. And there's no saying, too, that, you know, students, staff, anyone, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care about them. So that's how you foster ongoing professional relationships with the staff. Show them how much you care.
Thank you. Have you ever been terminated or asked to voluntarily leave employment? And if so, what did you learn from that experience?
I've never been terminated. Well, I will say, I think I lost a job one time at a convenience store over being sick when I was in college. But as far as in education, I've never been terminated. I've never been asked to leave. At one time in my career, I was not rehired in a position. And I learned a lot of valuable lessons, and I'll tell you about those lessons briefly. I learned some valuable things. First and foremost, one of the things I learned in that was, wow, I didn't understand politics and education. I didn't understand personal agendas with people. I didn't realize that existed. So politics and personal agendas was on the forefront. I thought, wow, this is not the world I thought it was. The next thing I learned was landmines. Anybody know what a landmine is? You ever stepped on one? I have. I've stepped on a landmine. It blew right up in my face. And so the lesson I learned from not being rehired was, wow, politics and agendas and landmines. Ooh, landmines will get you every time. The last thing that I would say about that would be power and authority. There's a difference. You may have the authority to make a decision, but you may not have the power to do it. There is a difference. You may hold a position of authority, but you may not have a bit of power. You may have all the power in the world, but you may not have the authority. I remember being in a community before that if you wanted something done, you could call the junk man. You could get some things done from the junk man. He could do more things for you than people that had the authority to do it because he had the power in the community. So there's, you know, the things I learned from that not rehire, again, would be the politics and personal agendas, the landmines, and the difference in power and authority.
What are the qualities of a good teacher in your view?
I'll go back to what I look for with the many interviews I've conducted over the past, 15 years. First and foremost, what I would always look for in a teacher, I wanted someone with character. I wanted to make sure that the people I'm putting in front of kids were good people. You know, and sometimes, you have to do some investigating. You know, you may like someone in that first interview, but once you dig a little bit deeper, you might find some flaws in there. But that was the first thing I looked for, is the character. And the next thing I looked for was the passion. I should say passion and compassion. Because if someone doesn't have the passion for what it is they're going to teach or coach, then they're not going to be the very best, and they're not going to provide the very best to the students. You've got to have compassion for those kids and for the parents and for the family situation that the kids are in. If you think every kid coming to you is going to be the same, you're sadly mistaken. So you've got to have compassion. You've got to understand where these kids are coming from and what they're dealing with at home in order to better serve them. We can't put them all in one bucket. You know, I've heard many stories that, you know, little Joe wouldn't work. Can't get him to work. Well, what do you know about that home life? Can you let me sit down and let me tell you what little Joe's going through? That's happened many times over my career. The next thing I look for is a work ethic. I want someone who will work. I want a worker. I want someone that doesn't necessarily, and as most of you know that have taught, that doesn't walk in the door at 7:25 and leaves at 3 o'clock. I don't want that. Because in this business we're in, and I know that's contractual, and they can leave. They can get there at 7:30, but, well, I don't want them there at 7:30. I want them there at 7:25 getting ready and be at their station at 7:30. But they can walk out the door at 3 o'clock. And I will say that sometimes I've done that. But for the majority of my career, I couldn't get finished in that time. So I'm looking for people who've got that strong work ethic. The next thing I look for is maturity. And maturity is not necessarily related to age. As a matter of fact, I had a collegiate football coach call me up one day and told me, was given a recommendation for a young man, a young head coach. And he told me, he said, Mr. Maddox, he said, that boy's wise beyond his years. I like those kind of people. I like the ones who are young that are wise beyond their years. They make very good teachers. I need a teacher that's going to be able to collaborate with their peers. I need someone who can work as a team, because in this day and time, we have to look at our content area, and we have to make sure we have common assessments, common pacing. We have to share our ideas, our thoughts, our best practices. So I need somebody that's not going to be on that island by themselves and refuse. And it doesn't matter how old you are. They don't care if you've been teaching for 25, 30 years or you've been teaching for 1 year. You've got to be able to collaborate with those people around you. Again, you don't have the lock on all the best ideas. Best ideas come from sharing. So I look for someone who's got the ability to collaborate in a team concept. The next, I'm looking for somebody who'll get the job done. No excuses. Roll your sleeve up and just get the job done, no matter what it takes. Because teachers are, I guess, the most flexible people I've ever worked around, because we have to be. We have to change on the dime. As soon as you may have the best lesson plans throughout the week, you're set to go, or just that particular day, then all of a sudden, something has just changed. The principal comes over the intercom, or you get an email because they just have gotten something, and this has to be done. I like people who's going to take that and do it with a smile on their face and going, got to get it done. Well, now we're going to have to stay a little bit longer. It don't matter. We've got to get it done. Let's roll our sleeves up, let's pitch in, and just get the job done no matter what it takes. I like that in an employee. Also, the last thing, just like that goes along with flexibility. You just have to be flexible, because things do change and can be changed in a moment.
Okay. How would you develop and maintain high morale among your employees?
I think morale comes, a lot of it comes from teachers feeling appreciated and being able to recognize those teachers who can not just go above and beyond, but who do good jobs in that classroom. That's one of the first things that we have to do is appreciate and recognize. And I know that when at Stonewall High School, the administrative team out there, we set up a system a few years ago that we had a spreadsheet, and it was open in my office, and all four of us, it had all the teachers' names on it. And we made sure throughout the school year, because you have to make an effort to do this. It doesn't just happen. We wanted to make sure that every teacher in that building got a note of thanks or appreciation from each administrator throughout that year. And so we would sit down and we would write, but we took that spreadsheet and we'd initial it and date it of when we sent that, because otherwise somebody's going to slip through the cracks. You know, and you may really appreciate someone and want to thank them, but because of your busy day, your busy week, your busy month, semester, you don't get around to them. But if we kept an ongoing list and we know who we've made contact with, I think that's important to make them feel appreciated and you recognize them. I think that confusion breeds negativity. When you have issues and things that are happening in your school, that if you're not clear with instructions, that confusion, if the teacher's confused, the negativity sets in. So you try not to have any confusion throughout your day. Be clear with your expectations and your directions of how to get the job done. You know, and I also believe that We should never take anything away from our teachers and our staff, faculty. When you take something away from them that affects their pocketbook and their livelihood inside their families, I think it hurts. I think morale slips at that point. I think we always have to provide our teachers and our people with the tools necessary to get the job done. And that sometimes is very difficult. When a teacher comes into your building and wants to teach, you've got to provide them all the tools. You have to provide them, first of all, the supplies, the materials, everything they need to get that job done. Now, you may not can provide everything on a wish list, but you sure can assign them a good mentor. You can make sure that they have a lot of help and a lot of support. You can provide them the opportunities to go to classrooms and visit during their planning period and watch level 4 and 5 teachers perform and get some best practices from them. So give them the best tools. Give them the tools they need. Something I would share with my administrative team also, we have new people coming in coaching positions. You've got to set people up for success. You can't set them up for failure at the very beginning. If you don't give them those tools that they need to be successful, you have set them up for failure. So I think it's very important that we give people what they need to be successful. And they make it on their own, or they don't. But if you don't give them what they need, you're tying their hands behind their back. So I feel strongly that we have to give them the things that they need. And I'll keep going, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The other thing is when it comes to morale, whether it be with students, and this is something that I taught our administrative team too, because this comes from watching other administrators, watching other teachers. I remember witnessing one time an administrator look at a child, a high school student, and look at him and say, "I knew I'd get you. I knew I'd catch you. I've been knowing you've been doing that. I knew I'd get you. Now get in here." And I would tell the administrative team, I said, that's the difference between gotcha and why. I said, with our students here at this school, we're not out to get them. I said, they're going to make mistakes. We're not going to be lying in wait trying to get you for something. It's not about gotcha. When a student gets in trouble, you look at a student and go, "Now, Joe, why did you do that? Now, you know you shouldn't have done that. Get over here and sit down, boy. Let's talk about this. Now, you know I'm going to have to get you some punishment. What's your daddy's phone number?" I said, "We're going to talk to him." It's not a gotcha. You have to discipline with compassion and with dignity, whether it be a student or a teacher, an administrator. You don't do it by gotcha. So I think that's one of the things that you have to watch your morale when you start doing that. And the other thing, I'll say this. I don't think the leader is always in charge of the morale of a school. I think there's things that you can do to help the morale, but you guys know as well as I do, negative people are going to be negative people, and it doesn't matter who's in charge. There's still going to be negative people, and there's nothing you can do about that. You can try. I've come across people in my life that I don't think Christ himself could satisfy. I feel like that every single morning I wake up in the morning, that I have a choice between a good attitude or a bad attitude every single morning. And when I swing my feet across my bed, the first thing I want to do is give a little thanks for that day. Next thing you need to do is put those slippers up underneath your bed. It may make you get on your knees to get them. So morale is a choice. It's not always something that's solely dependent on the leader of that institution, but we as individuals have that choice in how we approach our day. And when we approach our day, I would get on the intercom every day, and my goal every single day of my life when I teach, and when I say teach, I'm talking about every parts of education, and I would tell the students, don't tear anyone down today. Find someone and make a positive difference in their life today. And that's what I strive for each and every day, whether it be a teacher, a student, a parent, a custodian. Be the positive difference in that person's life for that day.
Dr. Maddox, what strategies would you use for staff that are not meeting the educational and social needs of students?
With this question, I looked at and I thought, okay, are they talking about central staff? Are they talking about school administration? Are they talking about faculty? Are they talking about uncertified staff? I really didn't know which way that was going with it, but I think anytime you're dealing with people, you're dealing with something that's based entirely on the individual and the circumstance that they're in. I don't think you can put a blanket statement on that particular question, because it all depends on the individual and what's going on with them. I think a leadership's responsibility is to always go down to the level of someone that they may not be performing the way you want them to, but you can't talk down to them and try to bring them up. You always have to go down as a leader to where they're at, understand where they were at and their level of understanding, and then you start working to bring them up to where you want them to be. When you've exhausted all measures, and I've been here before, as a principal of a school, I've had to terminate people, but not before you exhaust all measures. You see the areas, so first of all, it starts with the hiring. You've hoped to hire the very best, but let's face it, sometimes I've had to hire people out of necessity. I've had what we used to call the July surprise, and you've got 3 days before school starts or school's already started and you've got one candidate. That makes it very difficult. When you hire out of desperation, you're really at a disadvantage, and you really have to work with those people. There's a reason they don't have a job, most likely. But no matter who it is, you have to take that individual, go to their level, look and see what they're at, where do you need them to go, then you methodically pick those steps, get them to where you want them to go. You have to differentiate their professional development. You have to provide them the opportunities to grow as a teacher. You have to provide the opportunities for that professional development with strategies, whatever it may be. Could be strategies, could be classroom management, could be a lot of different things, but you've got to provide them the tools to get to where you need them to be. And if you see growth, and that was something that I stressed with my teachers, that as long as I saw growth, desire, want to, I've got something. I can work with that. But when I have someone who doesn't have the desire, or even may not have the ability to go where I need them to go, that's when we have to make changes.
What experience do you have regarding fiscal operations that would aid you in developing and proposing the district budget?
Well, I don't think there's anybody out there that, unless you've been a director of schools previously, that's totally prepared to deal with a $58 to $60 million budget. That's a huge budget.
Amen.
I don't think nothing would prepare us totally for that until you get into it and start working with it. I think the first and foremost, I truly believe in shared decision-making in all aspects. One person can't make that decision. You have to have a lot of input from other people. At Stone Memorial, we provided a budget committee, just like you have here at the board. Although our budget was very minute compared to the $58 million that you guys have to deal with, it's still the same concept. You have to have shared decision making, and we were dealing with ADA funds. We dealt with BEP, capital outlay. So at the beginning of each year, or at the end of the year, and then beginning of the next year, we started sitting down and started looking at our priorities and what we need to spend our money on. And then when we received those funds in the fall of the year, we looked at our wish list and what we wanted, what we had to do, what we wanted to do, and then what was our wishes. And so we'd build it on that, which of course, like I said, it was nothing anywhere close to the budget the board's dealing with. This past year, I've had the opportunity to work a lot with federal funds within the CTE department, whether it be through Perkins Basic or Perkins Reserve grants. We've, through the department, have written a couple grants and received a middle school CTE grant. So I am familiar with the federal funds that we get and all the hoops you have to jump through and the accountability of those federal funds, and it's enormous. So that's my extent. of working with that.
How do you operate with more mandates and less funding?
Well, if we had the answer to that, could we not get rich? That would be nice. I think finances are, whether it be your personal finances or your business finances, it's a very simple concept. We can't spend more than we bring in. That's something my father taught me when I was 14, 15 years old. You don't spend more than you make. You have to prioritize the needs, among those unfunded mandates. If you got the mandates, of course, you do not have a choice. You've either got to cut, you got to prioritize, you got to be creative. A lot of times you got to be creative about those funds. So unfunded mandates are quite difficult, but I've had a lot of experience dealing with them and know how to prioritize.
Thank you, Dr. Maddox. I'll turn the questioning over at this point to Ms. Hale.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so far for your answers. You've answered
You're
a lot
welcome.
of my questions already, but I want you to dig back to when you first became a teacher. Can you briefly describe your philosophy of education?
I felt when I first started teaching, it was, I could tell you many stories about that, but I thought that every kid could learn. I was a math teacher, and I was not a big fan of algebra, geometry. At the very beginning, I fancied myself because of my engineering background. I could teach calculus, I can teach this, and I can teach that. But once I got into the classroom, where I started gravitating toward was the students who were struggling. A lot of the at-risk students have got me involved in career and technical education because those were the kids that didn't necessarily have the home life of other people. I thought that it was our opportunity. Our job was to provide the opportunities for every kid in the system. It didn't matter if they came from an affluent family that had mom and dad in the house, Miss Hale. That didn't matter to me. Fantastic. That just meant that student had it a little bit better than someone else. But what about that child that lived with his grandparents? Mom in jail, dad's on drugs. What are we going to do about those children? They're the ones who need our support more than anything. So I thought every child needed to be given the opportunities as others. And sometimes it took a lot of work to give them those opportunities.
Thank you. And can I do one other?
I'd like to go around and get everybody one if we can, please. Thank you, Ms. Hale. Ms. Paris?
I just have one question. What role, if any, should extracurricular activities play in the school setting?
Oh, that's huge, Ms. Paris. I'm a big fan of extracurricular activities. I've coached a number of years back early in my career. I see that the extracurricular activities for the students keep them interested in school. And not every kid is involved in sports. It's not just about sports. We had a teacher a few years ago that started a club called the Gaming Club. And I encouraged this teacher to do such. That was his interest. He had a passion for gaming, whether it be video games, board games, card games, because every time you establish something in that school, a club or an organization, you're going to hit a small pocket of children. Otherwise, it wouldn't be served. It's not just about those athletes that come through. Football players are going to play football. Basketball players are going to play basketball. But what about those students that are not athletes? And when this teacher started the gaming club, I would hear it, and he met every Thursday afternoon, and I would hear all this noise coming down from a classroom. And I'd walk by there, and these kids who normally are not involved in anything are sitting there, they're laughing, they're playing, they're communicating with each other. And then the teacher became a tennis coach. And I couldn't believe some of the kids that were playing tennis. It warmed my heart, because now we've offered something else for those students. I started a program one time at Cofa High School. It had never been in this part of Tennessee. It was a lacrosse team for both girls and boys. And I was discouraged to start that program at the very beginning. But my philosophy is, it will hit kids that otherwise are not doing anything. Why would we not offer things for these kids? And I would tell parents at the 8th grade meetings, give us your kids. Let us have your kids. I can guarantee you a couple things. Number one, the kids are going to be around good people. You know, if you're at work until 5 o'clock and we have something going on at school, such as the gaming club or anything, or any other club, the rocketry club, you know, construction club, automotive club, let them stay here. They're going to be around good people. And number two, they're going to be safe. You don't have to worry about them being home and what they're doing. You know, I said, they're going to be here and they're safe. I would tell the parents, I said, just don't leave them.
Thank you.
Don't leave them here. We come and get them. But
All right, Mr. Brock.
Good to see you, Scott.
good to see you, Mr. Brock. Tony?
Tony's good. Do you anticipate a need to replace, reassign, or restructure personnel assignments within the central office and maybe within the administration of various schools?
I think that it goes back to an answer I had given previously. When you go into an institution, Mr. Brock, you can't go in with guns blazing. I think that is definitely something that has to be looked at. But within the first year, if I'm chosen to accept this position, I think within the first year at this time frame that we're in and in light of everything that's going on in our world, I think that it has to be adjusted until I look through those lens of the director of schools to give me a better understanding of the whole entire setup, that I can't make that decision right now. But I definitely want to do a needs assessment and find out where I'm at. And by the second year, I think that's when you start looking at making things your own. It's the same advice I gave a former assistant principal, that when they took over, don't try to go in and make all the changes the first year. You go in, you take over, you observe, you talk, you make notes, and then make small changes. But by that second year is when you start implementing your changes.
Ms. Boston?
Tony, you stole my thunder. We keep doing that. I'm going to ask you this question, but I think you've just answered it. Explain your opinion of the current organizational chart, and do you believe it to be effective and efficient at this time?
And understand that my understanding of the organizational chart comes from the last almost 12 months of working with this team here. And rest assured, Ms. Boston, I see people working hard here. I see people working every day, doing things that need to be done, doing it without any excuses, without grumbling, without complaining. They roll their sleeves up and get the job done. Same way as I'd see people in the schools when I was principal at Stowe Memorial. They would roll their sleeves up and get that job done. I don't have those lens that I'm looking through, that I will be looking through if I take this job in Salford. So I can't answer that fully.
I understand.
That it will take looking through those lens, looking at what we have, looking at the structure, and evaluating where we're at before we move forward with that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Inman?
Each year, we're spending over $3 million out of our fund balance in order to balance our budget. What steps would you take to prevent the depletion of the fund balance?
Well, it's just like when we were talking about the fiscal management earlier, I failed to mention, it's just with your finances, whether it be business or whether it be your personal finances, Mr. Inman, you never spend more than you got coming in. But the same thing as I taught my son is you always got to put back for that rainy day. If you don't put back for that rainy day, you're going to be in trouble someday, because it's not if, it's just when something is going to happen. Again, it's something that I would have to take a look at, that budget. I think that I would have a more of an understanding of where we're at, but I am a firm believer in putting things back for that rainy day. We also at the same time have to have a program for maintenance with our school system, with our schools, and with a rotational basis or at needs basis, and that's something that has to be looked at also. But I definitely, that's a priority when it comes to our budget. I agree with you.
Thank you, Ms. Hale.
Mr. Netherton.
Well, all of your questions that Ms. do you should I go to Mr. Netherton?
Yes.
Okay.
And I say that because one of your answers to question 11, one of your responses brought up another question for me. The question being, how would you develop and maintain high morale among employees? One of the responses you gave was the letters or notes of appreciation, and you addressed teachers. Were non-certified on that list?
Yes,
Okay,
sure.
good response.
Okay. Ms. Carter?
Hi, Dr. Maddox.
Hello, Ms. Carter, how are you?
Been here a long time. Talked about being a transformational and servitude type of leader. Explain to me one instance that sticks out in your mind where that transformation served you for the greater purpose.
A few years ago, we had to implement a program in our school system called RTI, Response to Intervention. And the state gave us a deadline. We had 3 years to implement that. And we had until 2016 and 17. RTI had been implemented at the elementary level for a few years prior to that. And at the high school level, no one had a clue how this was going to be done. That's why they said we're going to do it. You know, you got to have it done within 3 years. A lot of schools are sitting back, waiting on that last year to get it implemented. When we found out, and I presented it to the administrative team, that we were not going to wait to that 3rd year, I refuse, because I do not believe that. I don't believe you wait until the last minute to implement any mandate. You take it off in bites. So the whole scope of response to intervention was that you had to offer this intervention to students based on data points, and you had to implement it 5 days a week for a minimum of 45 minutes per day. To try to do that in first year, well, the last year in that 2016-17 school year, I refused to do that. It was too big. So the first step we made that first year, I said, okay, we're going to do this for 2 days a week. We're going to do it for 30 minutes per day. And then the second year, we're going to go to at least 3 to 4 days a week. We're going to implement it and it also was based on grade level as well. So we did it the first year. We learned some valuable lessons. The second year we implemented RTI, it was an eye-opener because we did go to 5 days a week with 45 minutes, but we found out at that time that we could not put tested areas inside what we called skinny blocks. There was a number of things we learned from our mistakes from that. By that 3rd year, we had worked out the bugs. And at the end of that 3rd year, my administrative team and I had a chance to present at a PI conference at the Music City Center in Nashville to other high school programs of what we had done and what we had accomplished, and I was very proud of that.
We've got time for maybe a couple more questions.
Becky?
Earl.
Pass? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, Miss Amby. Sorry.
That's all right. My question is, where do you stand on the safety of the students and staff?
Foremost, what could be more important than the safety? You know, one of the things that we had, and I have to go back, Ms. Hamby, to all I can tell you about is what I had an opportunity to do at Stone Memorial. Of course, being a director, you have to look at all your schools, you have to look at your campuses, and of course, we have someone in charge of safety and security, and we have a lot of members of that committee, so we have to look at that. But as a principal of a high school, and when I met with parents during 8th grade nights, I would make sure that they are aware, because parents were scared too. Parents didn't want to send their kids someplace they didn't think were safe. So what I assured them that we were doing at Stone Memorial was that at 7:45 every single morning of the school year, we had a custodian go into the back entrance and lock in that gate. We finally had to put up barriers along the gate because people were driving around those. So we stopped all the traffic on the back gate. The only way you come on this campus is through those front 2 entrances that we had. We had to upgrade our security system. We started out with 86 surveillance cameras when the school was first built, and I think we had raised that to somewhere in the mid-90s. We were finding holes and gaps in the coverage, so we were covering that up. Having an SRO officer at each school, I can't tell you how vital that is. And a good SRO officer who interacts with the kids and builds those relationships with the kids is a secret to everything. The safety and security, you know, we're always dealing with drugs and things in our schools because, I mean, that's part of the society. Dogs don't find drugs. What we found drugs with was through the SRO officer. From those relationships he builds, people giving him tips. Kids didn't want it. Kids didn't want it in their school. We've implemented, you know, we put check-in buzzards on every front entrance. I think at every school we did it at Stone. And there's only one way in, and we're not going to let you in if you don't go with that. And then also, another thing that we did every morning, our SR officer was charged with making the building inspection every morning at 7:45 to check all the exterior doors. Sometimes teachers or coaches were worse than the other teachers because they'd want to put a pebble or something in a door to go outside to somewhere and make sure they get to come back in. And that, I wouldn't allow that. We can't do that. So, number one, safety and security.
Thank you.
A kid can't learn if he don't feel, well, there's two things. I'll go back. I know you have more questions, but two things we have to make sure with our kids have. Every single morning, no matter who you are, you've got to be fed. You can't learn if you're hungry, and you can't learn if you're scared. So be safe, and let's feed them, then we can start our day.
Thank you.
Board members, I'm going to ask if anyone has a question that you just desperately want answered before we wrap things up.
How about Mr. Safdie?
Oh, Mr. Safdie, thank you, Ms. Carvey. I left Mr. Safdie out. Mr. Safdie?
Scott, can you hear?
We cannot understand you, Mr. Safdie.
I can.
Are you unmuted, Robbie? Okay,
If someone can understand it,
if
relay
you'll
the
just,
question.
I'll relay the question.
Okay. I can hear you through the computer, Mr. Safdie.
Okay.
That's great. And I'll repeat.
First of all, I want to thank you for your wonderful presentation. I'm thoroughly impressed with your answers and feel very comfortable in asking you this question. All right? If you are hired as superintendent, what measures will you take when your term begins in July to protect the students of Cumberland County and staff from COVID-19 if schools are open in August? Be specific with the actions you plan to initiate.
Well, I think, first of all, Mr. Safdie, we're going to be getting a lot of guidance from, you know, I would think from our State Department and from our health departments and the CDC. But to be specific and come up with exactly the steps I would take at this time, seeing that I don't have that position, I have thought about it somewhat, but we would be basing it on the guidance that we're getting from the state. You know, I think it's all in question, you know, what's going to happen. And that's one of the things that we have to do, Mr. Safdie. We have to plan for the opening of school. And as we move forward, we're planning, we have to plan for the opening, but at the same time, we've got to be aware that we have to be flexible because we don't know what the future lies for us. Until we know exactly what the future lies for us, I don't think I can answer that question entirely that may satisfy you at this point until we know exactly what we're dealing with. We need to find out what exactly we're dealing with in order to move forward before I can answer that for you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, sir.
Okay, we're right close to an hour at this point. Dr. Maddox, is there anything you'd like to address that we've not so far, or make a closing statement?
I do have one brief closing statement, so if you'll bear with me. Just good morning again, board members. You have a monumental task ahead of you in deciding who will lead our school system forward. Make no doubts about that. The pain we all feel through COVID-19 and the uncertainty of how we will proceed creates a lot of stress, anxiety, frustration, all through our schools, our community, our state, and across this nation. This is why this decision is likely to be the most important one made by any Board of Education in recent years that I can remember. I applied for this position in the midst of all this turmoil. I think you and I talked about that before. Not for any personal gain. I'm not doing this to gain personally, but to help our students and our teachers, our staffs, our parents, and the community get through some of the toughest times any of us have ever experienced. If I'm chosen to accept this position of director of schools, I can tell you what you're going to get. First and foremost, you're going to get someone who will work tirelessly for the community that I love. You're going to get someone who's lived in Crossville and raised a family for the last 34 years in this town. You're going to get someone who has dedicated their life to education for the last 31 years, excuse me. You're going to get someone who gives back to their community through civic organizations such as the Rotary Club and an active member of the Cumberland County Chamber of Commerce Board, among other events. Someone that will serve the community as an administrator, or someone that, while serving the community as an administrator of Stone Memorial High School, put together an amazing administrative team that fostered a culture of academic excellence and an athletic program based on hard work, dedication, teamwork, and a positive winning attitude. I think y'all would agree to that. They did a great job. You're going to get someone who is a lifelong learner and with a common sense approach to our problem solving. You're going to get someone who has studied the art of education and attained 3 postgraduate degrees, including a doctorate. You're going to get someone who loves to teach. And I'm not talking about just students. I love teaching students, but as I've grown in my profession, I learned to love to teach teachers. I love to teach future administrators. I love to teach administrators. And I take every opportunity I can in these teachable moments to do so. Did it yesterday with one of the people in my office. We spoke quite at length yesterday about administrative teams. It's at a teachable moment. When we have something that happens, you take that opportunity and you teach those people around you, because we have to grow our own. We have to grow our people. If leaders are not teaching, what are they doing? It's once been said that judge a leader by the number of leaders they produce. And I want you to think about this. At Stone Memorial, the last 12 years I was there, we produced 9 different leaders that went out and took administrative jobs either in Cumberland County or in the surrounding area because of a leadership program we put together and the leadership opportunities we gave those teachers. We've got 2 right now waiting, 2 teachers who want to take on their first role as an administrator. They're just waiting for that opportunity. You're going to have someone that will surround himself with people of different opinions that can come together in one accord. And again, like I said earlier, I don't want people around me that's going to tell me yes all the time. You're going to get someone who is humble and feels blessed when sitting in the stands of a school event surrounded by 3 generations of people. When I sat in the stands with grandparents, knowing I had their children in school, and now their children are on the court playing or on the field performing. 3 generations that have touched my heart. You're going to get someone just like you who's not perfect but flawed. And we'll make mistakes along the journey, but together we can succeed. I appreciate your time and the opportunity I've had to interview for this position. Best of luck with your decision. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Maddox.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tony,